Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our seminar part of the Digital Rules Human Values seminar series from the Global Initiative for Digital Empowerment. I'd like to say good afternoon for those who are in the Europe time zone. Good morning if you're in the North American or your Americas. And for those in the Western Pacific, good night or good morning, seeing that it is very early in the morning. And particularly to welcome and greet Mario Schrapen, the CEO of WAGOI, which actually stands for We Are All Going to Own It, and he'll explain that shortly. Just to remind people, the purpose of the seminar series is to explore both research and theoretical ideas and also practical experience of putting people at the center of the digital governance arrangements. And Mario today will be one of our practitioners who's sharing a very interesting story, I think, about the establishment of data markets, particularly when they relate to people's information about their automotive use and their car in Europe. If you wish to follow up on our previous seminars or this seminar, I want to share this with later, you can find the seminars also on our YouTube channel, which is at The Guide Global. At The Guide Global, and we'll share that on the chat with everybody on this call. So that's GIDE Global, and the first word, The Guide Global. You can find this seminar and then previous seminars as well. As that implies, this seminar is being recorded. We will be just talking with Mario for a period of time, and then we'll open for question and answers. If you ask a question, you will be recorded in asking that question. If you don't wish to be recorded, may I suggest you change your participant name to something more anonymous, and then potentially you can just put your hand up and we'll ask the question on your behalf, or you can put the question into the chat group for everybody and we can ask the question on your behalf so that you won't be recorded. So thanks very much for that. There's all sort of the rules for today. Let us now turn and speak to Mario, who has a very fascinating experience, I think, in taking some of the opportunities enabled by European legislation to actually let people get control of their personal data and create some value around that data and do so in a market type environment. In that sense, the work that WAGOI has been doing is quite, I think, illuminating for the general principles that GUIDE has been talking about in terms of data governance now for a couple of years. Mario, if I can just welcome you online.
Thank you.
And I'll start off with some questions. First of all, perhaps you could tell us about WAGOI.
I do have a small introduction slide deck of 5 slides, so you know what, and the audience then also knows what I'm doing, if that's okay. Yeah. And then you can fire away with all the questions.
That's perfect. I think that's actually what we organize. I'll let you coordinate that with Vicente.
Okay, so let me quickly share the screen. So if you see the screen, then thumbs up or something. I see that. Oh, perfect. So this is a story about vehicle data. So when I talk to people about vehicle data, some people think it's boring, right? But actually what we saw is when we talk about vehicle data, lots of cars are today connected, which is normal because we want to have also the convenience about when you're at home that you put on your heating, etc. So all these cars are connected. That's not a bad thing, to be honest. It's good because it gives you that convenience. The issue is actually that 84% of all car brands, they sell personal data, and that is an issue. In Europe, it represents a value of 75 billion, which is already huge. So the vehicle data market is worth 75 billion. If you look at this globally, it's worth 420 billion. And it seems that no one was doing something about that unfairness, about the fact that the car brand could sell vehicle data. Now, if I was a car brand, I would do at that time the same thing because there was no law, no regulation whatsoever that could stop them. So they just used what actually was available at that time. And data is, we all know, it has a certain value. Now, luckily enough, I live in Belgium, so also part of the European Union. They came up with an idea, and it was called the EU Data Act. That idea was 2 years ago. They signed it 2 years ago, and it was called the EU Data Act. And the EU Data Act was there for actually specifically for IoT devices, and a car is a big IoT device. So suddenly we have something that says, the EU Data Act says, hey, Mr. Carbrand, you need to give the data to the consumer in a continuous way. So this is different than GDPR. With GDPR, you just ask the data and you get it once after a waiting period of a month or sometimes 3 months. You get the data. With the EU Data Act, you get it in a continuous stream. So you constantly get new data. And if you don't listen, Mr. Carbrand, that's Europe, we give you a fine of 20 million. So this is something that we have set up. Now, the thing is, we didn't had any infrastructure. So car brands, they were forced to give away the data, but there was nothing for them to give away the data. The drivers, they also wanted to have the data because then they said, okay, now I'm in control. And when I look at businesses, they were interested in getting your data, but also they don't have any infrastructure. So that's basically what we've built. So we've built an infrastructure where you as a consumer have now the power of the data. And because you have now all the data, some businesses are interested in your data, like lease companies, insurance companies, roadside assistance companies. And basically what they do is they pay you directly for sharing that information. So you don't need to share all the information. It could be that an insurance company says, I'm only interested in, on a monthly basis, only mileage, and I'm willing to pay you, I don't know, €5 for it, just saying something. Now we did a kind of, so this is basically how it works, really simple. You download an app, you install it, and then you can share the data with whoever you want. Super simple for a consumer. And you can earn around €350 per year as a consumer. So this is nice. This is not something that we say. We did a survey about that, and it's a kind of combined value of €350. So you can get a discount on your insurance contract or whatever, but that's basically the value that you get. So we go now from nothing, you get to now a platform, and if you use it, you get paid actually for sharing data, and that's around €350. Just about WAGOI. So WAGOI stands indeed for we're all gonna own it. That comes, the reason for this is in Web3, they use something which is called WAGME. We're all gonna make it, and we made a kind of analogy on that. So we call this, we're all gonna own it. And the business side of our company is called WAGB. We're all going to build it. So that's a little bit how we see it. We have a big advisory board. We come together every month. And that's basically, in a very nutshell, I think even in 5 minutes, how our company looks like. And now I will stop sharing, and then you can fire away with all the questions you have.
I'll take the joy of being based in Rome today to be able to do this in a time zone. The next one of these seminars with Vicente, I'll also be asking questions at midnight. I suppose the first one is perhaps share a little bit more about your own background and why is it that you got into this? You founded this. What's the pathway there?
Yeah. So this is not my first company that I'm building. I built already some Web2 companies. That was super interesting. But if you see what kind of, how shall I call it? What kind of impression that I had for mankind, it was not super big, right? You think about how can I make money and how can I make as fast as possible money? But when you get a little bit older, you think some things are unfair and perhaps I can do something about that. And that is a little bit the reason why I started WAGOI. So the reason was just when I bought a connected car, I'm super interested in data and what people can do with data. And I'm actually also worried about data and what people can do with data. And at a certain point in time, there was that big thing that Google is the enemy because they know everything and they're listening, and also Europe said something about, okay, now we need to have something about controlling the data, and that was all fine. But we all forget that hardware is also generating data, and that's something that I want to do about. Now, to be honest, if I did this 10 years ago, this company, probably there were no connected cars, but imagine there were connected cars, it would look a little bit different at that time then. Because now we make it ourselves difficult by putting what I think is the best way, right? Putting the customer, the consumer in the middle. He has now all the power. But 10 years ago, it would be a little bit different. I would probably say, hey, consumer, here you get €5 if you use the application. All consumers would say yes. And I would charge big time on the business side. And the business side would also be happy. But now I make it more complicated because now I say to the business, you can choose whatever you want to pay to the consumer. And the consumer now can accept yes or no. So it feels more, how shall I say, more right what we do right now. But that doesn't mean that path that we've chosen is more easy than what would have been when I've set up a company like 10 years ago.
In previous conversations, you and I have explored this, where you've, in some respects, if you use an analogy, you're establishing a stock market where multiple parties can come and settle an agreement between them about the sharing of the data.
Yes, that's true.
And my understanding, your business model is that you take a commission from that transaction, which is what stock markets do, etc. Tell us a little about and that, it seems to me, I suppose a couple of questions emerging. How have the various parties to your market adapted to that? What do they find strange about that versus what they used to do? And I suppose the second thing is always the question with markets: how is the pricing working? How deep is the market, and how is the pricing working in that process?
Yeah, super great questions. I think because I've already set up some companies, I know that having different revenue streams is very important, right? So if a consumer has the power of the data, probably more than one business is interested in that data: insurance, roadside assistance, lease companies, battery check companies, whatever. So the only thing that a consumer needs to do is just check the boxes and share the data, and he gets paid. Now today, and you're right about that, and there the stock market comes in, there is actually no real value. We don't know if you share data with an insurance company, how much value is that? Is it €5, €10, €20? We don't know yet. We did that exercise and that research. We know in general it's around €350, but it could be that we're totally wrong and it's €600 or €800. We don't know. What will help is indeed that kind of stock market that I have in mind. So imagine that I'm an insurance company. You have all the data. I say I'm going to pay you €5 per month for sharing the data. You, in the very first place, say it's better than nothing. I will accept this because previously there was nothing. Now, other insurance companies could come along and they say, that's interesting. I also want a piece of cake. And I'm going to pay €6, €7, €10. So that's a little bit that entire stock market thing that will go up. And at a certain moment in time, if I studied my economics right, then the price will be set. Then we know, okay, this will be around, if you share that kind of information, it will be around €9 and €11 per month, for instance. But for now, we don't know this yet. So that's a little bit the thing. So this seems fair, I think, for everyone because consumer checks the boxes, get paid. Other companies come in, they think, okay, we can offer a little bit more. That's basically how it works. I see that you raised your hand, Paul, but I will wait a second to explain also what is strange, and then I will give it to you. Now, what is strange is for a consumer, this is all fine. install the app, getting paid. He loves it when he gets more. So perfect. What is strange for a business is they are not used to this model. They don't know about this model. What we've trained them the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years is everything in the world is a subscription. So what they know now today is, when I talk to them, is great business model. What is the subscription price that I need to pay so I can have access to vehicle data of my consumers? It's not. You need to decide what you want to pay to the consumer. All right. And do I need to pay a fee to have access to the platform then that you've built? No, because our model is a little bit different, because we take a percentage. Like Airbnb, you don't need to pay to use the platform. They take a percentage. It's the same thing with what we do. That is something that companies today find strange. They need to determine themselves, what is it that I want to pay for data that comes from a consumer? And they also ask me, what if I don't pay anything, but I still want to have access to the data? For me, fine. You can ask that data. It's up to the consumer to decide if they want to share the data for free, yes or no. So that's a little bit, they struggle with the fact that this is not a model where you pay a subscription, but it's a little bit different. And when something is different, it's always a challenge.
I wonder if we can take the questions at the end of the first session, if that's all right.
Oh, for me.
Yeah, but perhaps we'll just go for this, because we've got 3 or 4 questions we'd like to work, and then we'll get to full quick Q&A.
Don't forget the question.
Yes, please don't forget the question. I can see how you can attract consumers. How you can attract companies. How do you attract enough consumers? And how do you inform the consumers about the benefits?
Yeah. If I want to be suicidal, I would set up a B2C company, right? I'm not suicidal. This would take lots of money, so I'm not doing that. I'm trying to play it smart, and I'm going directly to businesses that are interested in vehicle data. Could be a lease company, could be an insurance company. And I'm going to the insurance company and I said, listen, you want to do proactively something with your customers, I can help you. But your customers need to be on our platform, on that WAGOI platform, so they can share data with you. So they push their customers into our hands. I'm not laughing for that, but that's the nice model. And they will also be rewarded, of course, that they get lots of tokens that they can give to the consumers for free, etc., that kind of stuff. But we are not a B2C model. We focus on the business side. But of course, it's a two-sided marketplace, right? We need to have consumers as well. Otherwise, it will never work, of course.
And the consumers have choice to, let's take it's an insurance company, they can then be available to other insurers if they wish to make offers to people who are on the market?
No, because then I'm shooting in my own foot if I do that, because the insurance company is paying us. If the consumer wants to go to another insurance company, they can do that. But it's not that we actually, to start first, we don't share any data with our platform. It's always the consumer that says, I want to share data now with this person or this organization or whatever. So imagine that an insurance company says, you're not a customer, but you get 20 euro if you share for a month your data, how you drive, etc. That could be, yes, a business model. So that's something that I can't stop. But then it's up to the consumer to decide, do I want to share that, yes or no?
Can you see a situation where, for instance, an automotive association or someone like that would say to its members, we should all join WAGOI, you should join WAGOI, and then have this option to deal with multiple parties like multiple insurers or multiple battery operators or whatever?
That's definitely an option. Absolutely. Yeah. Because this model, what we have is previously, when we talk about vehicle data, everyone was looking only at one company. There was one insurance company that want to do good for their consumers. They had that kind of dongles to put inside a car, etc. They were all looking at one specific database, etc., one specific organization. That's something that I definitely want to change. But yeah, my dream, by the way, is also when you buy a new car, that a car brand would say, listen, we know that we need to give you the data. We know it's obliged mandatory by the law. Download the WAGOI app, have fun with it. And in the end, because that's a little bit the reason why the car brand loves us, not because the 20 million fine that Europe has dictated, because Europe and car brands, they have another issue actually, and that has nothing to do with the EU Data Act. It has to do with another big giant that is actually coming in onto the European market. And it's all from China. They're worried about that. So they don't want to invest anything regarding the EU Data Act, what is happening right now. So they love it that we come in, we just use the APIs that are available from the car brand. And in the end, the business model is also when the consumer is sharing something to another business, we take a percentage, but we also give a percentage back to the originator of the data. And in this case, it could be the car brand. So in the end, the car brand will still get paid by using our platform. So for them, it's really okay to stimulate actually consumers to use our platform. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's not, we don't see a car brand as an enemy at all. So that's a little bit the beauty of this model.
You said before that the size of this market was $450 billion worldwide. What's that? I mean, that's the car companies themselves getting the car data. What do they do with it? How do they make that sort of money out of it?
It's an estimation that McKinsey made. What they do with it, today it's a little bit, they sell it to insurance companies, they sell it to anyone they want. Now that will probably stop. And there is one reason why it will stop. And it has to do with anything that is happening in Europe. And that will come to the US as well. And that's one magic word, and it is consent. Everything that has to do with data, you need to give your consent. Do I want to receive emails from you? I need to give my consent. Is it now still allowed to share vehicle data while you did not give your consent? No. And that's the beauty of our model. You, as a consumer, you definitely give your consent because you get paid for sharing data. That's a really big issue.
And that's the impact of the Data Act.
Yes. No.
All right. No. Very interesting. Oh, how about I ask, I was going to say, how do consumers benefit? Do consumers have enough information here to understand they're benefiting, or importantly, that they actually may, I'm thinking particularly about insurance, they may find themselves disadvantaged if the consumer knows more about them?
The consumer knows more about them, or?
No, if the consumer shares more information with the insurance company, may not give them a better deal, may give them a worse deal.
Therefore, it's always, I would never share data with my insurance company, to be honest. But if I look at my wife, she said, yeah, I'm sure I'm going to give data to my insurance company. If I get a better deal, of course, but I know she drives really well. I'm not saying that I'm driving like crazy. Sometimes you have those moments, right? And we did a kind of study as well. And we all said, what will happen if you share do you agree to share your data with your insurance company? Most people said no. Is it okay to share your vehicle data with an insurance company if you get a discount on your renewal of your insurance contract? 85% said, of course. So that's a little bit the difference. If you get something in return, most people will say, of course, I will share the data. Who cares? What kind of data do they want? And that's the specific thing as well. It's not that as a consumer, you hold now all the data that from a vehicle, but you don't need to share all the data. You decide what kind of data you share. If it's only mileage, so that's also a possibility. An insurance company says, if you share me mileage, you get €5. Yeah, I want that. if you share me mileage and the number of hard stops in this month, you get 10 euro. You could say, no, I don't want that, because then they see that I stop really hard every 10 meters. That will not be in my advantage. That's something you decide yourself. So it's up to the consumer if he's willing to accept the money for sharing certain extra pieces of data.
Okay. And I suppose you'd say that unlike other data markets, people have got a long experience of A, driving cars, and B, dealing with insurance companies. So they have some sense of what the insurers or others would be looking for.
Yeah, indeed.
I think maybe, yeah. Last question from me before we open up for Q&A, and Paul Mullen will be the first on that list, is what are the challenges for the future? What does the future look like, and what are the challenges you can see?
What does the future look like? I ask myself that every day, especially what is all going on. I hope that the future will be that the model that we're setting up will be a little bit the standard. What I mean with that is that you as a consumer can decide who to share your data with, that you're more in control of your data. That would be great if we can get to that step. And also, if businesses are more open to this way of working, that it is normal that they decide what kind of value they give to a consumer for certain pieces of information. That would be lovely. If we get that to the future, that would be great. I think, and if we can do, because most people don't understand, and perhaps I can end with that in the very first step, you give something for free. So a car brand, an OEM, needs to give for free the data back to the consumer. What they now seem to understand is, wait, we give it for free, but it can open up new business possibilities. In the end, they could get more than that 420 billion, because every time when data and mileage is such a nice example, because in insurance, roadside assistance, lease company, everyone is interested in mileage. So it could be that one consumer is sharing that same data point with 4 or 5 businesses. So in the end, it could be that a car brand gets more by doing something strange in the very beginning, by giving away data for free. That would also be nice if people will start to understand how that model will work.
Okay, that's great. Let's open it up to questions. A reminder to the people who are participating, we've got about 25 people presently on the call, with more joining every minute. If you've got a question, put your hand up. And if you want to ask it anonymously, why don't you put the question into the chat, and we can ask it just anonymously on the chat. And Paul Mullen has his hand up, so we'll start with Paul.
Thanks, Mario. I'll go back to where I was when I stuck my hand up the first time, and that is the market, right? So if you have the first buyer comes in and they pay $5, why would the second buyer pay $6? It's right. So it's not a sealed, like a closed auction. So they don't have to win, they don't have to beat the others. So where's the competition in that system?
For having more customers. That's basically what it all is.
Okay, so they're competing so that the user will allow them to have the data. But then, so
Yes,
in that,
and become a
the user
customer.
has to know how many people are looking for it and what they're willing to pay, and so that they can make the decision about.
That's step 2. Step 1 is actually they start with their normal insurance company and they say, yeah, this is my insurance company. I want to share my data. And they're giving me €5, for instance. So it could be that at a certain moment in time, companies start to present themselves and say, hey, on this platform, we give €6 or €7 or €8 whatsoever to get more customers in. So it's not about having the data at that time, but it's having the customer as a whole to sell them a new insurance contract. So it could be that a new insurance company comes in, I'm going to pay you €8 per month for sharing the data. And if you drive less than 1,000 kilometers a month and you share that data, I'm going to give you an extra €2. So that is just to get all those new customers in. So for me, this is a new lead channel for getting new customers in. And that's a little bit what we talked about the stock market. At a certain moment in time, the price will be X amount for mileage, for
Right.
instance.
As mostly as recommended as like a perk from, say, the insurance, or it could even be the dealer, right? So the dealer has different objectives than the car brand, right? So they might actually present this as, you know what, to make this sale on the car, right? Yeah, you can buy this car and then you get this much back over whatever
Yes.
period of time.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
That
indeed.
might be a good way to go. I've got one other question. I've got a whole list of questions, but I'll stick to two. I've got a technical question, which is because this data, it's multiple issues of data, right? So
Yes.
it's kind of like a subscription in that the data continually goes out. So
It's
that
like that.
then has to be pieced together, right? Whoever's using this data wants to know that this portion is the same user as the other portion, so that they can
I
put the
don't
data together over time. So if they get this month's data and then next month's data, and they want to knit those together.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure if I understand the question, to be honest. There is a continuous stream of data, yes. Can you?
Right, but then that's going out to the buyer.
Yes, to
And
business
the
one,
buyer has
insurance
to
one.
know that this stream of data is from a particular user.
Oh, yes.
So
And you
my
want to
other
know how we
question is
do
about
that.
anonymization and how that works.
Ah, okay.
Because normally, like, you'd clean it out so that you can't identify the user at all, but now you have to identify the user because you have to knit the data together.
Yes. So the beauty of this is we don't care about anonymous data because the consumer gives the right to share data. Now, that being said is funny enough, we don't share any personal data. We communicate with everyone with the VIN number of the car. So if your name is Paul or Mario or Stuart, whatever, we don't care. It's the VIN number that is linked in their systems also with you that is the unique identifier for that.
But there's
So
geodata in the, I assume part of the data is location, right?
no, because you decide whatever you want to share. So if you only share mileage, you don't share any location whatsoever. So the consumer has the data,
Okay.
but
But
you as a business don't have that data. That is the beauty. So if it was geolocation, we had a problem indeed. But it's
right.
not needed because the consumer did not give his consent, the magic word for that. So I'm
Right.
not
So it
worried
depends
about
on
that.
usage. And
Yeah.
some buyers would need that, but yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but then it's up to the consumer to say, yeah, I want to share that. So they give their explicit consent. Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's great, Paul. And Paul's joining us from Canada. Stuart, who's joining from the UK, Stuart Dresner.
You were on mute, Stuart. I can't hear
Right,
you.
I'm not on mute now. Thank you. Okay,
Oh.
Mario, great idea, great business concept, and I think it's a wonderful example of the GUIDE principles. So congratulations on that. I'll start with one question to with quality control. Do you have a role to review? You said everything depends on consent, and I understand that. But the problem with consent has always been the wording of the consents. So do you have a role to review the terms and conditions which the insurance companies and the lease companies and so on use to communicate with the users, the consumers? Often with privacy policies, they're lengthy and complex. Do you have a role in reviewing the wording of the consents to ensure that they're fair and they meet your quality objectives? So that's the first question. And then I can offer a couple more if no one else has any questions.
I will quickly answer to that. So if we look at the wording of if you have an agreement with an insurance contract with an insurance company, we don't look at the wording or something that they use. There is something else. Specifically for that contract, we use a small piece of Web3 that is known as smart contracts. What that means is that you will have a direct contract with your insurance company saying, I will give you data. And in that contract, smart contract, it also states, as a reward, I'm going to pay you X amount of money. So that is embedded in that smart contract. And that's something that we do check, but we cannot check if, I don't know, if the contract is, if you stop 5 times very hard and you drive more than 1,200 kilometers and blah, 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 and then I will pay you nothing. That could be the case. But if you accepted that, then who is in fault? Who, not us as a neutral platform. So
I wasn't thinking about those kind of level of detail. I was thinking that the overall contract is set up within a sort of fair framework. That's what I'm thinking of, not the absolute fine details.
No, we don't check that. No. Yeah, we do check the smart contract, but we don't check that. No.
Okay, that's very helpful. Now, does anyone else want to ask questions? Give someone else a chance, or I can.
Stuart, wanted to just ask a clarification then. Mario, in that consent, does that are the limitations on reselling? So if you say consent once and then the other party gets the data and continues to resell it themselves, is there a limitation on that?
Yeah, that's not allowed. Also via the EU Data Act, not allowed. You need to have specifically the consent of the consumer for the things that you want to do. And in that smart contract, it's also stipulated there that it's not allowed to resell the data.
Great. So Stuart, why don't I let you do another follow-up question, then we'll move to Hilda, and then I've got a question online that I'll share from another party.
Okay, thinking about that, my background is I'm founder and chief executive of Privacy Laws and Business for an information company in the area of data protection law. So my natural next question is, have you had any discussions with national data protection authorities about the way you're running the company, collecting a lot of personal data? So have you had a discussion, or you'll perhaps wait till they contact you if they do?
No, we had continuous discussions about how we collect this kind of data. And they helped us also to improve actually what we're building. Probably also one of the frameworks that we use is GIDE. So GIDE is pretty well known in the automotive industry as well, how we handle data, how we structure some things. And one of the things that we improved is, and we didn't even thought about that. Someone asked me, that was responsible for data, what will happen if a new Dieselgate will turn up? And I said, I don't understand the question. And he said, imagine that you share data with a consumer and it's mileage, for instance, and he changes that so he gets a better deal for the insurance company. And I thought, oh, damn, that could be very horrible. I said, they cannot change that. But his mind was, imagine that they can do. So basically what we do right now is if we get data from the car brand, we also hash it. So we make sure that this is the data that we received. So we make a kind of, hash is a kind of check number behind it. So if you change later on something in that file, we know it is not the original file anymore. This will protect us. If a big car brand says, hey, we gave the right data to WAGOI, they changed it, that we can say, no, we have here the original data. This is the proof. So this is also basically something that we did. But data is important, yes, and we need to be careful about that.
Great. As you're based in Belgium, did you hold those discussions with the Belgian Data Protection Authority?
We hold it with multiple places, actually, because the company is not based in Belgium. That has specific reasons for that. One is the token that we do, but it's not based in Belgium.
Well, is it based in another EU country?
It will be based, the European headquarters will be based in Malta.
Malta, okay. Well, which has a data protection authority and a fully functioning.
Indeed, and I spoke with them as well, yes.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thanks for that. Hilda.
Thank you, and thanks for an intriguing presentation. I have a couple of more technical questions. So you collect data or some app collects data So could you just elaborate a little bit on how these data are collected in the first place and how it's possible to compartmentalize them so you know what data is about mileage and what is about stop and go and these kind of things? I think that would be interesting to know. And then the second question is more like, how is it going? Is it a business that is up and running? And the reason I'm asking is also because these data markets often has some kind of minimum scale, and because you have lots of network effects and these kind of things. So have you reached the scale where you think you can be operational? And what do you think that scale would be, if not?
Very good questions. Thank you for that, Hilde. Let's start with how we collect data. That was your first question. It's actually pretty simple. So as a consumer, you download the app, you connect with the user and password that the car brand has given to you to access actually the mobile app of the car brand. You connect with that, and then we connect with the car brand and get actually the data. So it's super simple. Now, I think you know a little bit more about car data because you asked later on a very specific question about mileage. So for everyone in the audience, just so you understand, unfortunately, when I say, yeah, I just simply connect with the API of the car brand, that's absolutely true. What is a nightmare is that every API is different per car brand. So indeed, BMW could say, for me, it's called mileage. For car brand B, I don't know, Volvo, they could say it's kilometers. Car brand C has another name for it. So indeed, we need to, at a certain point in time, categorize that and make it available to the public that we all speak the same language. In some early years, we had some companies that were doing that. They were called neutral platforms. Yeah, we had several of them. Some of them, they don't exist anymore. Autonomo, WAGOI, they don't exist anymore. But that's a real struggle that you mentioned, Hilde, that it's not so easy to categorize that. We use now a platform to make it a little bit easier for us, but there will be a moment in time that we do need to categorize everything, and that's not the case yet. Also, be transparent. The car brand today has more information than we can capture at all, but it's just too much work to get all the data that they capture. It is allowed from the EU Data Act, but it's just too much information that we need to capture and to categorize. So you touched a very good point there. Now, what is the status of the business and when are you ready to scale? No, we're not ready to scale yet. We do have around 2,000 people now on the mobile app to test it out. So that's all fine. Does that mean that we are scalable yet? The issue here is because we have chosen also to work with smart contracts, which is on a blockchain is immutable, then you understand that you cannot just change a smart contract. It's not like a piece of code where you say, oh, I made a mistake, I'm going to change some codes over here. That's not possible. There is an entire process behind that. That's the reason that I'm super cautious to release it too early, because especially when it's linked to that token, which is a financial value, it could end up in a nightmare if we don't do it properly. So that's the reason why we're testing it thoroughly before we release it public to the public. I think it could scale very fast on the other side, because imagine that I'm going on the news and I'm just saying, hey, everyone that I'm from Belgium, let's imagine that I'm going on the Belgium news. Hey, we invented something.
We might have the standards on the internet side might have slowed us down a bit for a second. But while we're doing that, can I just make the point that Mario is an awardee of the My Data global organization, and My Data, of course, are a key partner for GUIDE in these seminar series, as is the Global Solutions Initiative and the Centre for National Governance Innovation in Canada. And so I want to say thank you to those partners for their assistance in this seminar series. We'll keep an eye on Vicente as I think he tries to work through.
I don't know what happened. Yeah. Oh,
It's the internet. You can't trust the people who ran the protocols for that stuff. Okay. I had one, assuming that Hilda had finished those questions. I had a question here from a participant who asked, who has governance over the data they collect? The API is proprietary or third party?
The APIs are from the OEMs themselves. Yeah, they own the APIs. We want to be friends with the car brands, so we don't do anything with those APIs, right? So we just use them to get the data, etc. If they don't give all the data, all fine by us. Let's first start this business, and that's fine. Yeah, so that's basically it. It's the car brand that has the APIs of the vehicle data.
And just for my sake, can you give us some sense of the amount of data that the car manufacturers presently harvest?
What they have or what they share? Two different things.
Well, what they're allowed to collect, and then I suppose what are they allowed to then share with others?
Oh, okay. What they're allowed to collect, everything. So there are studies that says that car brands also collect data about your sexual activity in a car. I kid you not. So everything is actually allowed. There is no law against that. To be honest, I never saw that data when I talked with car brands. But actually, there is no law, and also the EU Data Act does not prevent any car brand to collect as much as data as possible. The EU Data Act only says all the data that you have, you need to share with the consumer, except the ones where you do a kind of calculation on. So imagine that you calculate a kind of driving score, and that is based on certain parameters. You don't need to share that because it contains IP. You had a kind of formula in your mind how to calculate that. That's something that you don't need to share. But yeah, then everything that you think about, how many times you stopped, did you overspeed? There are even things like what is the percentage of the brake pedal that you pushed? Is it 30%, 40%? I don't know. So there's a lot of data, really.
Yeah, two quick observations, and then Peter Lixiades had a question, so we'll come to Peter. And then perhaps if we've got time, perhaps also Paul, if there's nobody else, Paul Nolan, I think had another question, and Stuart might have another question. This is obviously an interesting area where something that is considered to be IoT is essentially personal data. And so in the context of the European Union's data structures and then the omnibus, this is a clear example where something which is IoT, which you're required to give the consent, they've not done the studying for personal data. But because they're required to do the consent for IoT, then it's actually becoming a way in which people can say yes or no about my personal data.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's an interesting illustration that we need to use in discussions, especially in Brussels, about you've done it in IoT, and that's essentially what's happening here. So I think that's intriguing. An observation from Australia, and this is anecdotal, so I'm not going to claim I know this 1,000% for sure, but I have read it in the newspapers, so I assume it's correct, that at one stage when the New South Wales government made the data available for collection of data for cars going across the Sydney Harbour Bridge on the toll system, which was supposedly for some form of financial openness. The greatest use of that data from people making requests for the data was from the divorce lawyers of Sydney. For tracking that people who said they were late at work one night were actually not late at work, but had gone to see someone. And so I wonder, similarly, I mean, there must be, is geolocation incorporated into that data that you're talking about?
They do have it. It is a fact that a car brand knows in a week time where you work and where you live without that you put it in somewhere. They know with the data that they have. And they also know what you do late at night if you go sporting or doing some sports or do some other sports. So they know.
Okay, those questions generated a whole lot more questions in the group. So let's go quickly,
Yeah.
and we can probably go for another 15 minutes or so. Peter, do you got a question? I thought Peter had a question, but he's not activating at the moment.
Apologies for that.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Can you hear me that? No, sorry. No, fascinating presentation. I've got two questions. One of them is regarding methods up front to protect consumers and methods during the lifetime of the data transfer relationship. So one is currently when they're giving their consent to data, is there a means in the contract whereby they can say, okay, in areas A, B, C, and D, you can have my personal data insofar as I consider it to be personal, but in areas F, G, H, I, J, K, I would like it to be anonymized. And that's very important for me because I consider that to be more personal, and the other ones I consider to be more economic data, which doesn't really affect me that much. And secondly, if it's a blanket, yes, you can use my data in the following areas relationship, is there some means that you have as a company during the course of that relationship to conduct some form of auditing that the party using the data is using it appropriately? So is there some sort of mechanism where you can take random checks and so forth without it being too onerous on you?
Super good questions. Let's start with the last one. With the auditing, can be very short. We don't have that yet. So we don't have a mechanism where we say, you promise that you will use it for better rates for an insurance contract, but we don't have any auditing to check that for the moment. No. We will see over time if that's needed, yes or no. It is a good question. For now, we trust is now the main issue. We trust that they don't do anything. History proves that trust is not always the best thing, but here we use it. And then you say if there's any methods up front when you share data that you want to anonymize at a certain point in time, your data. That is not the fact. That is not the case right now, but there is something specifically which is set up for roadside assistance companies. Normally, you don't need to share. You're pretty private on where you are at a certain point in time, except if you have an emergency brake or something happens really bad in your car. I guess you want to send out where you are, especially for roadside assistance. So we do have in our smart contract is nothing less and nothing more than if then else. If my airbag goes off, then share my longitude and latitude with my roadside assistance, for instance. That's something that is specifically there, but not the other way around. What you say that you share longitude and latitude, and at a certain point in time, you want to anonymize it. We don't have that yet. No. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's great, Mario. Can I suggest the following order? Josh Moffat's got his hand up and he hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet. So can I suggest Josh, then Paul, a question from Paul, a question from Stuart, and a question for Vicente?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Mario. It was interesting. I just had one question quickly about, you mentioned using blockchain. So I'm just wondering if you're writing any personal data to that blockchain, and if you are, then how, if a user revokes consent under the EU Data Act or GDPR, how do you remove that from the blockchain? You can't remove it, right?
No, you cannot remove it. It's immutable. Therefore, so I always say 80% of everything that we do is just normal Web 2. The other percent is blockchain, so Web 3. Smart contracts is blockchain, and tokens is also blockchain. The data that we write to a blockchain is something like mileage, which could later on be used in fraud or whatever because it's immutable. But we don't share any. I don't think you will happy if we send longitude and latitude where you are on a blockchain because that's public and everyone knows where you are. That is not a good thing. So no, we don't. We use just a small portion of blockchain and we don't need to use blockchain because the name blockchain is in there. We only use it what it's good for, and that's token and smart contracts.
Thank you.
Yeah. An increasingly common hybrid model. I think that's interesting. Paul Mullen.
Thanks. So this is a bit of a difficult question. I don't expect there will be a concrete answer, but it's been touched on. This is complex data, right? And then the ways in which the data is used and transferred and manipulated is also complex. And if the user is expected to have agency over decisions about this data, how do they know what they should choose? And you're putting yourself in the role of the expert about the data. And so you have a role to educate the user and to explain this complex data in a simple way so that they can understand it and have agency.
For the user, it's more, they go actually on that marketplace, they see the different things that are available, and then they see what data that they need to share and what they get back. So I don't think it's for them, I could be wrong, but I don't think it's for them super complicated.
They can press the button, but they don't know if they share geolocation. They don't know what the repercussions of sharing that data.
Ah, okay.
Right?
Or
if they share data with the insurance company and then the insurance company boosts their rates. Like they don't understand the relationship. Someone has to explain that to them.
Yeah, I understand your question. At the moment, we don't have that in the marketplace where we say, hey, watch out if you share your data. It could be that your insurance contract goes up if you drive like a lunatic. We don't have that kind of guidance. We do have examples on, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just the insurance example. Could it be worked into the contract with the insurance company? If they take that data, they can't use it against the user. Something like that. You could build some of these protections into the contracts you have with the buyers so that it's simpler for the users so that they don't have to be aware of all the dangers they're built into the contracts. But
we can do that. I wrote it down because that's a good idea. On the other side, and that's the question I think that Peter asked about audit, then we still need to trust them. If an insurance company says in the contract, we will not use the data against you, how can we prove that? We all know how sometimes an insurance company is creative about thinking how you want to raise the amount that you need to pay. But it's a good question. Yeah, I don't have a really specific answer right now, but I wrote it down that we need to protect perhaps a little bit more the consumer. Now they see only the upside, and that is, hey, I get money for doing nothing, only sharing data.
But they're not really sure what the value of it is or what the repercussions of sharing are. So
no one is sure what the value of the data is. Even
difficult.
The businesses are not even know what the value of the data is.
Difficult problem.
Yeah, but that will come.
Thanks, Paul. And Mario, that's an illustration of when we talked about the GIDE principles and what we've been working on in the broader personal data markets, about this role of an expert advisor, because these sort of questions do emerge in the broader sense. But that's a reflection of our thinking. Stuart.
Thank you. I think my questions are quite simple. To give us a greater idea of how the thing is working, can you name any of the car manufacturers that you're working with, Mario, and perhaps an insurance company or two? And when are you planning to go public? When is this test period over, and when are you planning to launch into the market?
The launch is pretty easy. I hope as soon as possible. So I'm pushing it a little bit. The developers, they are saying it will be Q2 2026.
This year?
Yeah, of course. This year. Yeah. Otherwise, we will not be testing it. Yeah. Okay, now, car brands, that's a little bit the funny thing with the NDAs, of course. I can only say that I work on European level with 90% of all car brands and also with Chinese brands.
Okay.
One specific thing that I want to say over there is when I talk with Chinese brands, they don't have an issue to share any data whatsoever. The only thing that I want to know is, am I still entitled to have the data on my side so that I can check the vehicle? Yeah, no problem then. Here's the data. Good luck with it. If I talk with European car companies, and there is one specific that I won't mention here, then I see that they are totally terrified. They think they're all giving away gold, and this is my business model, and whatever you want to do with it. And we don't believe Europe. They made this up in their golden cage, and they don't know what they're talking about. Totally different mindset. So it's really funny. It will only happen. It's the same thing as GDPR, I think. Once the first fine of 20 million is being there, then everyone wakes up and thinks, oh, we need to do something about this.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Vicente.
Yeah, thank you. Two quick questions. The first one is, how do you see the trade secret exception playing out in your business models under the Data Act, and whether do you foresee that being a real problem? And the second one is, I think the Court of Justice has said that VIN can be personal data depending on whether there are reasonable grounds for the data, in this case, data user, to identify the data subject. So does that change what you're doing, and how does it change it? Or yeah, that's basically my two questions.
Yeah. I will start because I need some extra information about the trade secret. Let's start with the last one. So where you talked about the VIN number and eventually also license plate number. In some countries, they are seen indeed as personal data. If I look, and so I live in Belgium, I think, now I need to lie, I think here in Belgium, VIN number is seen as personal data. And in Holland, license plate number is seen as personal data. Because that license plate number goes so you take it your long time life with you, while in Belgium, every time you buy a new car, you get a new license plate number. So yeah, it is personal data. Does that change anything with the EU Data Act? Yes. Previously, when you said, I want to have, so remember, GDPR has nothing to do with longitude, latitude, has nothing to do with how you're speeding, has nothing to do with, did you turn on your lights, yes or no? Zero. And GDPR is, you ask it, and they have 1 month or eventually 3 months to think about it, and then you get the data. Totally different. So the EU Data Act gives you that in a continuous stream via an API. That is just beautiful. So in my eyes, it does change a lot. While VIN number or license plate number was previously already private, personal data, no one was doing anything with that because there was no real option. What would you ask to a car brand? Hey, here's my VIN number. What kind of data do you have from me? They need, no, it was too complicated. So the EU Data Act definitely changes this to have a constant stream of data. Now, you asked me something about the trade secret. I didn't really understand the question there. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, data holders can withhold or can stop sharing the data if they fear that their trade secrets might become public or they're going to lose economic value. There needs to be some negotiation between the data holder and the data user in order to share those trade secrets, which I imagine most of these car manufacturer can say, all this data aggregated is a trade secret, even if it is from one user. And obviously, if you see the European manufacturers saying this is gold mine, they might just say this is all trade secret, so we might not share it, and that might stop or change the way you approach these car manufacturers.
Mm-hmm. So you say that a car brand at a certain moment in time will say, hey, all these data, mileage, for instance, that's for me a trade secret. I will not share it with you. That's basically what you say.
That's what the Data Act says, yes.
The Data Act is a little bit different. The Data Act literally says all the data that is not derived needs to be shared. Mileage is one of them.
Unless it's a trade secret. And if it is a trade secret, there needs to be necessary measures from the data user, in this case, the insurers, to ensure that these trade secrets will be protected. And if the data holder, in this case, the car manufacturer, fears there are not such measures, they can withhold the data and they can stop sharing it.
Yes, but trade secrets are more like I said in the beginning, driving behavior, for instance. That's a kind of trade secret. Mileage can never be a trade secret. Common error codes from a car, your oil level is too low, etc., that can never be a trade secret. That is also in the Data Act, that can never be a trade secret. But there are some things like a driving behavior or something, what I wanted to explain, that is indeed a trade secret. That's something that you don't need to share.
Thank you.
In that case, you wouldn't share it with the consumer.
They will not even share it with us.
Yeah, so it's actually the consumer that won't share it with you, they won't share it with you as opposed to the insurer.
Yes.
But yes, okay, that's good. I think we're now coming to the end of our time. We're at 20 past the hour. I'm sure there are people who would like to ask more questions, and I would encourage members who are attending, if you do want to ask more questions of Mario, then please reach out to us and we'll make certain we put people in contact with each other and you can do that more. Mario, can I say thank you very much for your time? Thank you for the exposition.
Thank you.
Thank you for your courage in getting this all started and driving forward. It's really quite fascinating, and we look forward to keeping a conversation going together. And I'd say to colleagues and others who are watching this now online, these principles are important. Getting that experience of both practitioners as well as researchers together to actually share and how things can actually really happen, I think is a very valuable space. And we hope this is illustrative for the community that cares about human-driven data governance. Thank you very much. And we'll have a session in 2 weeks' time, which will be communicating more about some of these issues. Thank you.